Alright, welcome to today's lesson on planning techniques. Today what we're going to be doing is taking a look at a variety of different planning techniques that managers today use in companies to make sure that they're making effective decisions and making sure they're setting out proper plans to set their company up for success. The number of different ones we're going to look at, including participatory planning, benchmarking, forecasting, contingency planning, scenario planning, and time management. The first of these is called participatory planning. This is where we look at who is actually going to be involved in the planning process. The idea here is that we want to try and incorporate as many of our employees as possible, those who are going to be affected by the plans and those who are going to help implement them. We need to include them in the planning process, and by doing this, we leverage a number of benefits. The first is that the more people we have, the more creativity and the more information we have available to us to help make sure that we're getting up with the best possible plan we can possibly have. The second thing we have is that by incorporating our employees in the planning process, we increase their level of acceptance and commitment towards those plans, because they have a vested interest in ensuring that those plans are completed and that the work is completed properly. After all, they helped make those plans, so if they don't work out, it's partially their fault. They also gain a better understanding of those plans because, again, they helped make those plans. Right? The more you help to make them, the more you understand the rationale behind those plans, so you're going to do a better job at fulfilling those plans. The next idea we have is called benchmarking. This is where we compare our company with industry leaders, other companies that are out there. We're going to try and look at what they do best and take what it is that they do best and apply that within our own company in hopes that we also will achieve that same level of success. We can also have internal benchmarking where we're going to do the same process but within our company. So I'm going to take a look at what my peers are doing and making sure I'm adapting their best practices in my own work. Or maybe it's from one department to another. What is one department doing that's working really well, making sure we apply those same ideas to our own department. The next thing we'll look at is called forecasting. This is where we're going to try and make assumptions about where the marketplace is going to be in the future. What's going to happen in the future? Okay? We can do this both qualitatively and quantitatively. In qualitative forecasting, we're going to find experts in the field and find their opinions as to where they think the marketplace is going to go. Quantitative forecasting is by using mathematical and statistical analysis of trends that are currently happening and projecting them forward into the future. Both of these types of forecasting involve human judgment. The experts in their own opinions, and then somebody who's going to judge what those mathematical and statistical analysis are telling us. Because there's human judgment involved, and because it's in the future and change can happen, we have to be aware that these forecasts aren't always going to be correct. They are subject to error. Things may change to mean that these forecasts don't actually come out. You also need to realize that forecasting itself is not planning. It's just the first step of planning. It's identifying the possible scenarios of where we think we're going to be. The actual planning involves deciding what we're going to do as a result of those forecasts. And that's where we get into contingency planning. This is where we're going to plan to achieve a goal in each of those possible forecasts that we have created. We're going to try and identify a variety of different circumstances that could exist in the future and then develop a plan to make sure that we are sitting ourselves into the best possible situation for each of those possible options. Okay? The key to doing this well is early identification, identifying that we are in fact moving towards that particular scenario, so we got to put in place the plans that we created to leverage that scenario. So for example, perhaps I'm going to have a product. Maybe I'm Pepsi and I'm selling a particular type of Pepsi, and I have a plan in place for when this particular type of Pepsi no longer produces the sales percentages that we thought it was going to. As soon as the sales percentage drops below that mark, we start putting in place the plan on how we're going to deal with that particular product. The other type of planning we have is called scenario planning. This is a longer term version of contingency planning. In this case, we're trying to identify future alternative scenarios and develop plans for each one. It's a larger picture, further down the line, big picture. This process increases the organization's flexibility and preparation for future shocks. So example of this would be Shell. Shell might look in the future and say, what's going to happen when we have no more oil? What are we going to do when oil supply is very limited? How are we going to stay afloat? And they might look at a variety of scenarios. One scenario is where the worst case scenario, where the result of lack of oil results in global conflict. How are they going to plan for their company to survive an area where there's global conflict, where everyone's trying to fight over those resources? Perhaps they have another scenario for a best case situation where they're looking at all the governments are collaborating and working together to try and maximize the usage of that oil and make sure it's used properly and we're conserving and so on. And then again, they'd put a plan in place to deal with that particular scenario. The final thing we're going to talk about isn't really a planning tool specifically, but it's something that's very helpful for us when we are planning, and this is time management. It's a critical skill to making sure that we have the best possible plans and we're going to be able to implement them in the best possible way, and it's often overlooked. To do this, we want to make sure a couple of things. Number one, we're prioritizing our plans, making sure we focus on the ones that are most important and highest priority, and we want to make sure that we're doing so in an efficient manner. Okay? By doing so, we make sure that our stress is kept to a minimum and we keep our productivity to a maximum. It helps our managers work in a more focused and effective way. That's it. That's all we have time for today. We'll see you in class tomorrow where we can practice what we've learned.